How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia. Today we're going to be reviewing this camera slider. This is the GVM 80QD 80cm 32-inch motorized camera slider. I'm not being paid to say any of this. I bought this with my own money. I think it's such a fantastic piece of kit, and I think for the price point versus the features that it packs, this is going to be a real game changer for a lot of filmmakers. I came across this company when I was looking for an alternative to the Rhino Evo slider because I wanted a motorized slider to use in interview settings, product promo shoots, time lapses, but I didn't want to spend the kind of money that the likes of Rhino, Edelkrone, iFootage are asking for their motorized sliders. I think it's too much to spend on an accessory that you might realistically use for like 15% of your shots. So I did a bunch of research and I came across GVM. They're a company based out of San Francisco, I think, and they make two things: high quality LED panels for lighting and motorized camera sliders. So let's have a look at what we've got. The slider comes in this padded soft case. It's not a solid case like a flight case, so you wouldn't want to dump this on a load of gear in a truck, but it's absolutely fine for lugging around in your car or over your shoulder or just carrying around. You can feel that it's soft, but it is pretty padded still. Inside the case, you can see that it's got cutout compartments for everything. So you get your instruction manuals, you get your, code, QR code. Cool, let's just forget about that. First of all, on the side here, you've got the controller. This is basically what acts as the brain of the entire slider. You've got a bunch of buttons, you've got an LCD screen, you've got an on-off power switch as well as a little 1/4 inch thread. You got a battery plate for NPF style batteries, which is cool because that's what my monitor uses. That's what a bunch of different items that I already own, some of the LED panels, use, so I already have those batteries. Then you've also got a USB port, which is going to power the slider. You've got a DC in, and then you have a shutter remote port for time lapses. It feels solid, it's got a metal chassis, simple enough to use, it's got 5 buttons, you can't really go wrong. Then there's the included NPF style 750 battery. Again, this one's rated at 7.2 volts, but if I compare it to this larger NPF 970 battery, which is rated at 7.4 volts, really the difference is negligible when you're going to be powering these, so no need to worry there. It also comes with a charger for the batteries, but if you've watched any of my reviews on which chargers I use, you'll actually see that I have a big double NPF style charger, which I would much rather use than this little one here. But if you don't have an NPF charger or any NPF batteries and this is your first one, this will do just fine for charging it up. Then there's a bunch of different cables here, which are all shutter release cables, so that you can trigger the camera that you have mounted on there to do time lapses, and there's literally like every single port you can possibly imagine. That's the Canon one. I'm sure there's a USB port in here somewhere. There you go, for Sony. There's everything. And then there's a controller cable which controls from the controller, which is battery powered, to the slider, which has the motor on it. Then onto the slider itself. This pouch lifts away. As you can see, it's quite thin, but it's enough foam to protect it from any little knocks that it might get. This slider has very nice carbon fiber legs. It's 32 inches or just below 32 inches, which for me is perfect. They also do a 48-inch version, but I don't have the room or the need for a 48-inch slider. 32 inches is perfect. It has a nice solid metal chassis, and if we turn it on its side, you can see it's got a motor with a timing belt already attached there. It's already set up, ready to go. You don't need to assemble anything else. Underneath the slider, there's a cheese plate so that you can mount it onto various different tripod settings. But to be honest, with any slider like this, that is this long, you're never really gonna get the best results by mounting it centrally on a tripod. You're gonna need to mount it at either end on 2 tripods or 2 light stands or whatever. Because if you mount it centrally, when it comes here, it's going to shift slightly, and when it comes there, it's going to shift slightly because of the weight distribution of the camera. It's just too uneven to balance on that small plate. And that's not really anything to do with this slider per se. It's pretty much every slider that offers that much length. You're going to find that it just loses balance when the camera gets to the edges and there's too much weight on them. So instead of mounting on this, use two tripods there. Then on either end of the slider, there are 2 1/4-inch holes for tripod mounting. And if we extend this leg out, you can actually see there are more holes to mount a 3/4-inch thread or a 1/4-inch thread. So for example, you could put a friction arm to mount the controller so that it's not just kind of hanging around. All right, so let's extend these legs out and get rid of the case. So here's the tripod as it stands on its 4 legs. You can extend these if you need to, just by unscrewing this, and then you can lock it in place with that red screw up there so that it's extended out. It actually extends pretty far, it nearly doubles the length of the leg. You've got a release nut here which secures or releases a clamp that's on this so that the head doesn't move around. And actually when it's released and the motor isn't powered, there's very little friction on the motor, and you can do this without damaging the motor, which is good. Now on the central caddy here, you've got a 3/4-inch thread adapter, or you can unscrew that and it gives you a 1/4-inch thread adapter if you want to mount a camera directly to it. But what I'm going to do is actually mount this Edelkrone Flex Tilt number 2 or Mark II or whatever it's called head, just because it's easy enough to use. I've tightened up these nuts so that they're rigid enough that it's not going to kind of move around freely while I'm doing a slide, but it's handy enough because I already have the plate on it and it's already set up to go, and it's just a little more solid than a ball head. Another reason I use this kind of head is it packs away nicely in the case, so it all slots in. I don't need to worry about it. All right, so let's connect the slider. And we'll use the supplied battery just because it's charged up and ready to go. Now, the very first step you need to take, absolutely without fail, is setting up the start and end points of this slider, because this motor doesn't know what distance you want to slide. You need to define that. You need to tell it, I want to start here and end here, because you can go from edge to edge, or you could use 30 centimeters in the middle. That's entirely down to you. So to do that, you come down to setting, hit the middle button, set start, hit the middle button, and then press the left button and it will slide automatically to the left. And just make sure you hit stop before it hits the end. So I'll hit stop there. A lot of people don't hit stop and the slider goes to the very end and continues trying to slide past the edge, and the motor does this horrific sound that literally makes me die a little inside. And what you're doing is essentially grinding the gears inside the motor because it doesn't know that there's an obstruction there. You need to tell it that there's an obstruction there. So once you're happy with that, cool, that's the end point. I'll hit the middle button again and then hold it for a few seconds and it'll bring you back out. Then come down to set end, okay, and then hit the right button and we'll send it all the way over to the right of the slider to set the end point there. Now hold the middle button again to exit that and we're set up to go. Now you've got 2 options. You've got video shot and time lapse. Let's start with video shot because that's really the one that I'm going to be using the most. You've got manual mode and auto mode. For manual mode, you essentially set the speed by pressing up and down, and it'll set the speed as a percentage. So if I bring this down to 85%, and then I hit the left button, and it will power up to that slide at 85% speed. And if I let go, you can see that it ramps down to a stop. It doesn't stop suddenly and make your camera shaky. It ramps down. So if you feel like you're shooting and actually that slide has gotten to the perfect spot to stop, you let go and it will ramp down to a very nice, slow, smooth stop. But to be honest, I didn't buy this to use manual mode. I used this so that I didn't have to worry about it. So let's go into auto mode. Now, auto mode has auto loop and auto stop. Auto stop is essentially, it will run from one end to the other automatically without me having to press anything, and then it'll stop. Auto loop will run from one end to the other, ramp down, and then ramp back up and come back, and do that indefinitely until that battery dies. That's really the reason why I bought this. So let me show you that. I'll set the speed. Let's go a little bit faster this time. Let's go, you know what? Let's go 100%, even though I probably would never use it at 100% because it's a little bit too fast for my liking. But what we're gonna do is press the left button, and it's going to go all the way to the left. I mean, that's your right, but it's my left. Ramps down to the end point, and then goes back. And it will do that indefinitely until the battery runs out. What's great about the ramping is that it doesn't give you that really sudden movement like that. It doesn't jerk the camera. So if you have a telephoto lens on there, you're not going to get that sudden shake that you'll get from the fact that it's not completely welded together. There are some parts, some gaps of vibration that can get through. By having it ramp like that, it means that it's going to gradually accelerate it, so you're not going to get any sudden jerky movements. Great. Press the middle button to stop it and it'll ramp down. And that was at 100%. Let me show you how fast or slow it is at 1%. Ready? That is pretty slow. I mean, you could pretty much time lapse on that if you wanted to, if you were filming. Another thing you can do is gradually increase the speed while it's tracking. So if I go at 1%, press right, and then gradually bring this up to 100%, it accelerates all the way up. Lovely. And now the part of the slider that makes this an absolute steal for its price tag is the pan track feature. This middle bar here controls the rotation of this center point, this center caddy. And so adjusting these rails at both ends will allow you to either track a subject that is centered, so you can see the camera will rotate. You can turn these the other way, and now the head will perform up to 120-degree pan that is smooth as eggs. The side of the slider is nice and marked off with millimeter markings so that you can make it exactly the same on either side. Make sure that you are precise, and that way you will get very, very smooth, perfectly tracked movements. And obviously you vary the distance here depending on the distance of your subject if you're tracking, to define how much of an angle it will track at. This is pretty much the feature that made me buy this slider. As I said at the start, I was looking at Rhino, Edelkrone, iFootage, and they all had great looking sliders that could pan and track, but at a price point I wasn't prepared to invest in for such a feature. What's more is that they're pretty much all controlled either by the controller or by an app on your phone, which personally I hate. The fact that this is a mechanical process, that the angle you choose decides the rotation degree, that's just perfect for me. And the slider's graduated nicely enough that you can be precise when setting that angle. And really, the more you use this feature, the more intuitive it gets in terms of distance and therefore angle you need to set for that distance. Now, one thing with the fact that this is a mechanical process is that there's going to be some factor of friction, right? And so I wanted to make sure that there were no micro jitters, because that's often a problem with this kind of mechanical thing that is forcing a head to pan like that, is that you will see micro jitters in the footage. It'll look nice and smooth while it's working, but then you look at the footage on the big screen and you see these little jitters. And I'm happy to report that this has none. It is super smooth. I don't know if it's got felt on the liner or something like that, but as long as you keep this bar clean, dust-free, dirt-free, then it is gonna remain super smooth. So here I'm using the Sigma 30mm f1.4 DCDN lens for the Sony, and arguably this is the focal length that I'm going to be using the most often for this situation, where I'm going to have a slide that's going left and right and panning towards or tracking towards the center. And then there's the time-lapse feature. Now, time-lapse took me a while to get a grip on, and I'm pretty sure I get it. It's just really not all that intuitive. There's very little explanation in the manual, and I could find very little information online. But essentially, if you go into time-lapse mode, you've got 5 options. You've got interval, time-lapse, stop time, photo, and photo loop, or auto loop, sorry. So the interval at 0.1 is what I'm gonna go for because I want it to travel the tiniest of amounts. Time-lapse, I'm assuming, is the trigger time of the camera itself, so that will expose for 2 seconds. Stop time, 2.2, it always has to be 0.2 more than the time-lapse mode because That's how long it's stopped for, so it needs to make sure that it is finished exposing before it moves on. So there's always a 0.2 of a second there. So 2.2, I'll actually just make that 3, and then photo count 1000. To be honest, if you're doing a time-lapse seriously, you're gonna have wanted to calculate all of this beforehand. You're not just gonna set this up like this and guess it. You're gonna wanna know exactly how long you want an interval for, how long you want to expose for, how many shots you need to make up the sequence that you're going to build this time-lapse into. So all of this should already be predetermined by you, and you just have to set these values in. And then loop, no, I don't want a loop. I just want it to go from one end to the other and be done. All right, so I think that's good. I'm gonna hit enter, and then the speed here is going to be the speed that the motor would normally go in video mode from one end to the other while stopping on those intervals. So again, you're gonna have to set this to be able to set the speed of your time-lapse. So let's say I want this to move at 20% of its normal full speed. And I'm gonna hit the right button, and now you can see it's moving a fraction, it's stopping for 3 seconds, and during those 2 first seconds when it's stopped, if I had my camera plugged in there and mounted on there, it would be triggering it to take that photo for that time. And now, like in video mode, you can increase the speed as the time-lapse is happening. Bring it up to 100. And you can see it is covering a greater distance now than it was when it was lower. You hit the middle button to pause it if you need to readjust anything, and that's the time-lapse feature. And again, you can use this middle bar to create a panning shot or a tracking shot while you're in time-lapse mode. And provided you're using the right cable for your camera, you're all set up to go to do some pretty awesome time-lapses. All right, a little feedback from my part for GVM. One thing that would be great to include is a little holder for the controller, because as it is, you either have to put it on a friction arm or just have it kind of hanging around. And I know it's got a Velcro strap, but that's not really ideal. It would be great to have like a little holder that you can put it on the end of the slider in one of those inch threads. That way you set up your slide, you put the controller in, and you leave it, and you don't have to worry about it dangling or getting caught on anything. Another thing that would be great is a coiled cable instead of the slick cable, because it just means it's not going to get tangled up. It means that it'll be able to stretch if it needs to, but otherwise it'll go back to being nice and tidy and not get tangled, not get knotted, and just, yeah, it'll just be a lot easier to use. It would be great to make the time-lapse feature a little bit more understandable, a little bit more user-friendly, because it took me a while to get to grips with it, and there was very little documentation to understand how it worked. So in a future firmware upgrade, if it's possible to just simplify that a bit, that would be awesome. And finally, it would be great to offer a hard case option for people who want to buy this directly into a hard case, into a flight case, for example, that they can take on a flight. They can check it in. They don't need to worry about the slider being damaged or crushed. It would be great to have that as an option at checkout from the store, you know, when you're buying it. And that's about all the feedback I have for GVM, really. I absolutely love this slider. It's fantastic. It's upped my production value by a considerable notch. And I think for the price versus the features it packs, it's really a must-have for any filmmaker who doesn't want to invest all of that money into a Rhino slider, an Edelkrone slider, an iFootage slider, but who still wants to get smooth, motorized, pan and track shots for their productions. It's a must-have at that price. So well done, GVM. Very impressed. I look forward to seeing what else you come out with. There's a link in the description if you want to buy the slider. It's an Amazon link, an affiliate link, which means that I will get a percentage of the sale. It won't cost you anything more, but it'll help sustain this channel to do more awesome reviews. All right, give this a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, and hit that subscribe button to get more videos from me at dodmedia. It's gear reviews, it's tutorials, and it's monthly giveaways, and I try and post at least once a week. All right, I'm gonna leave you with a question. What would you use this camera slider for in your productions? Leave it in the comments. I'd love to know what you say. All right, see you next time.